So I'm back with another review, this time Jack Kerouac's Visions of Cody. So what this is during the time when Kerouac was writing On the Road or living the adventures of On the Road, which is his famous book. And this is particularly a long series of conversations with the character is called Cody in it. Neil Cassidy, the character that Cody is Neil Cassidy, and Jack is Jack Doolittle. They're in California or San Francisco. So I guess they decided to make a recording on a tape recorder of their conversations, and then Jack transcribed the conversations. And there's probably about 150 pages of their conversations, and they're kind of a little on the incoherent side. They're definitely on a lot of drugs and drinking quite a bit. So that's the most part of the book. Before the book, it's kind of a longing for the recordings, the transcriptions. It's kind of Jack longing to see Cody and doing some messed up stuff in New York City before he decides to go out to San Francisco, and that's about 100 or 120 pages of that. And I'd say that part is the most interesting part of the book, just because the conversations are quite incoherent. And then the next part of the book is called Imitations of the Tape, and I can't figure out exactly what this is. It's kind of like a stream of consciousness, but it's like spontaneous prose, which is what Jack is known for, except it's even more incoherent than the conversations between Jack and Neil Cassidy. So I had trouble actually reading the last part that was quite incoherent, and it's just a bunch of spontaneous prose. And the weird thing about this is it's kind of like, I don't know if you ever got really stoned or something and then figured out about the game, the supposed game, where you're not supposed to think about what you're thinking, and if you think about the game, you lose the game. So I actually lost the game in reviewing this book, but it's kind of like that, like almost like that mindset, and just pages upon pages, like 150 pages of just spontaneous prose that's like him winning the game, so to speak. So it's kind of funny. But overall, I would say that this book is not going to appeal to a lot of people. I think you'd have to be a hardcore Jack Kerouac fan to really appreciate this book. And even if you are, it's not one of his best books. It was not published in his lifetime. It was published after he died. And what ended up happening was they published parts of it because it was basically unpublishable. The Wikipedia that I read said that it was basically unpublishable, and then after he died, obviously he wasn't writing anything more, so they still wanted to, you know, get some money off of his brand and stuff, so they published this book in a smaller version of a kind of a slimmed down version of this in a very low quantity. It was a limited edition of about 500 books, but then since then they've published the entirety of it, and it does have an intro by Allen Ginsberg, but the Ginsberg intro in this is actually at the end. So I don't know what happened with the different versions of it, but from what I read, apparently in some versions it's an introduction by Allen Ginsberg. So overall, I would say this is probably not going to be a very enjoyable read for the majority of people, but if you're a Jack Kerouac fan, I think this is kind of borderline memorabilia, if you ask me, if you wanted to be honest from me. So yeah, it's borderline memorabilia of Jack Kerouac. So you'd have to pretty much be interested to really get anything enjoyable out of this. Which I think there's a fairly large market for that sort of thing anyway, because I've read his sketches, notebook sketches, and it's kind of the same thing. It's borderline memorabilia. A lot of it's incoherent, but it is his notebook sketches are a little bit more poetic, which is kind of nice because you don't have to be so specific, and it can be a little bit vague at times with poetry. So yeah, this is not one of my favorite Kerouac books, although I am a big fan of Kerouac. He's probably one of my favorite writers of all time that I've read so far. And I did actually kind of like parts of it, even though it was mostly incoherent. So that's about it. That's all I have to say about this book. I hope you enjoyed my review, and if you can, like and subscribe.